Hey, and welcome to day 3 of the Adobe Creative Challenge. My name is Wojtek, and today we are talking titles. But before we do that, in case you might have missed the last days or you want to sign up for the full Creative Challenge, please go to behance.net/challenge/premiere, and all you need to know you'll find there. But now let's get straight into it. And I will already say today we'll be not only working in Premiere, but also in dun 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 After Effects. I'm kidding. It's not at all that bad. I personally have gone from someone who was scared to even just look at the After Effects icon to someone who is absolutely glad to open it up, because I just figured, especially with titles, it just makes my life so much easier. But for now, let's stay inside Premiere and look at one or two ways how we can create titles. And let's start at the beginning. I've already inserted a nice little landscape clip with a little bit of room for a title. That's something I keep in mind these days. If I want to work with titles, I even try to already shoot the perfect footage to insert a title or frame and compose it that way. The first thing we want to do to work with a title is, let me make this one a little bit bigger, is to select our type tool. We can either do this with the cursor and clicking it, or we can simply go over here, hit T, and then start writing, like for instance, title. The next thing we're going to need is the essential graphics panel, which I have on my right side. If you don't have that, and if you're looking for it, please go up to Window and search there for the essential graphics panel, toggle it on, and that's what we'll be working with. So as you can see, this is not perfectly center. I want to center it, and that's the first thing I usually do. We have those two little icons, vertical and horizontal center. So I'm gonna hit those, boom, we're done, it's centered. But this is not looking too appealing. Something I personally like to do when we're working with, say, cinematic titles, although I will say cinematic is different things to different people. Let's center this back again. Would be something like, something I personally like to do when I work with the essential graphics panel is, let's select, for instance, this font. This is the one I personally like. And I like to go down here and increase the spacing of my title. And I like to go wild with it. I like to go, whoops, that was my title. I like to increase the spacing to 500 or something. And I basically figured there are two ways you can use titles these days that look good. You either go really full screen, you make them big and bold. Let me select my title element here in the timeline. And if you don't see all the options we had before in the Essential Graphics panel, just make sure to select the title you're working with above. So one way is to make it full screen. The other is, that is also something that I see Aidan Robbins do regularly, is to do something pretty small. And I think those are interesting techniques. So you can either catch attention with being wide and bold, or make something small and that way grab the attention of the viewer. But sans serif is something I think not most people would advise these days to use as a font. I personally like it, but let's go with something a little bit more modern, like this one. That's a little bit bolder, a little bit bigger. So I think this looks good and small, but let's maybe change it to something a little bit bigger, just so we know what we're working with, to 100. I think that looks okay. Decrease the spacing. Let's be a little bit more moderate. And we already created somewhat of a nice looking title. This works perfectly in here. We might also change it to something thematic when we're working in it already, like live in Austria. Let's center this back again. I like, just for safety, to click always the two buttons, just to make sure that it's really, really center. If you don't know that yet, if you want to extend or shorten the title, you can simply click on the graphics element, on the title element up here, and drag the beginning or the end of your clip back and forth. Let's maybe not start at the full beginning. Let's pull this here. And one thing one thing you can do instead of working with effects and movement and a lot of stuff is just to match it to the music. We don't have a music clip, but what sometimes works is when you have a beat and it goes something like doom 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 doom. that's enough. Sometimes that's enough to put in the title. You can also match this with a hard cut or whatever. But we want to do a little bit more today. And the easiest thing you can literally do is to go to Effects. If you don't have an Effects panel or not sure where it is, go to Window and toggle it on or off. So you may find it. And I will type in Cross Dissolve. I'll just simply drag this onto my clip. Or what I might do instead of dragging it, what I personally like to do is to hit Shift and D. And that's gonna insert a cross dissolve at the beginning and at the end of my clip when selected. And I can do this also as well for instance, my video clip. See, fading in, fading out. Let's have a look at how this looks. It fades in and it fades out. A very simple effect. Now let's say I'd like to have a very slow fade in. What I'll do is I'll go down here, or let me maybe blow this up a little bit and double click on my cross dissolve. And let's say I want this to last 3 seconds. So now we're going to have a very gradual effect. There we go. Let's drag this a little bit out. And this one I want to disappear quite quickly. So let's change this by double clicking it to 10 frames. Whoosh, and gone. Okay. But maybe let's go back to a second, excuse me. All right, the next thing we're going to do to make this a little bit more interesting is to add a Gaussian blur. This is, again, something that I personally like to do. We're going to search in the effect controls, which you'll find if you don't have them or you don't see them, again, under Window, Effect, Controls. Okay, now we're going to search for our Gaussian blur. There it is. And we're going straight to the beginning of the clip. There we go. Make sure the clip is selected. And we're going to increase this to something like 100 or maybe even more, 150. If I delete the cross dissolve, you can see that my title, the text, is barely visible. If I go back to 0, this is how it looks. And if I gradually increase it, it's going to disappear. Now I will, oh, excuse me, I forgot one step. We're going to the beginning of the clip, increasing the blurriness, hit the stopwatch, and then move all the way over until the end of our cross dissolve and change this value to 0 again. What we now have is a slowly, magically appearing title. And at the end, we're going to do basically the same, but in reverse. We're going to add another keyframe with this little icon here, move to the end of the clip. I'm going to blow this out to 150 again as blurriness value, and it's gone. Now that, in my opinion, is already looking a-okay. But let's say we want to make it a little bit more interesting. Let's have a little bit of a longer duration here. And we're going back to the beginning of our clip. And now in our effect controls, we're going to hit the stopwatch on scale. And I'm going to change this. I want the title to slowly move in, and I don't want it to be a crazy zoom. So I'm just going to slightly decrease the scale to, let's say, 90. And move in the timeline to the end of my clip. Go back to 100. This is one way to type it in. Or if I go back, another way is to hit the reset icon, which will basically also jump back to 100%. Let's have a look at how this looks now. Title slowly moving in. And we've created in a quite short amount of time something that is looking fine, let's say. But for now, let's go back. Let us reverse all this, reset. Let's throw out Gaussian blur. Why is it not leaving? Okay, let's delete the cross dissolve first. Let's set this back. And let's look at something else we could do to make our title appear. One thing I personally also like to work with a lot are masks. For that, we move in our effect controls to the opacity option. And I personally, like, you could either use the circle option here, the rectangular option, which it gives you, or you could draw your own mask, however you prefer it. For simplicity's sake, I'm just moving back with Command Z here. For simplicity's sake, we're going to select the rectangle, drag it all the way out. As you can see, in all the areas, the mask is present. We are seeing what is happening. So we want to drag this out so our title is fully visible. What we're going to do now is go up to the position of our title, hit the stopwatch, and move it down until we cannot see it and it vanishes behind the mask, so to say. Maybe a little bit further down. Let's do 750. Then we're going to move. You can do this in frames, like you can literally count frames like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If we're going to zoom in here a little bit, you can see that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, moving the frames. But what we could do instead is literally just feel it out. Move down here, for instance. I'm going to zoom out again in my effect controls with hitting minus. And now we want our title to go back up. If you forgot where the middle value was or what your original value was, what you can do is again use the reset icon and it will jump back to where we started. Let's have a look at how this. Yeah, this is a little bit quick. So let's move here. Let's select our keyframe, drag it out, have another look at it. It's looking better already. What we might want to do is not have such a hard edge. So we might increase the feather option of our mask down here. Let's go back, have another look. Okay, this is looking interesting. Maybe move a little bit faster. All right, cool. But now I want that movement to feel a little bit more organic. So I'm going to select both those keyframes, hit them with double click, go to temporal interpolation and change them to Bezier, if that's pronounced correctly. And then I'm going to open up this little arrow here next to position. What I can do now is basically go in and play around with those. So instead of just selecting Bezier, I could also select ease out so that we're moving with a slide. So we're slightly, I would tend to say ease in, but it's actually ease out our text. And then we're going to select the last one, select ease in. And now you can see it's not all that linear. It's not moving at one pace and then suddenly stopping, but it's slowly starting, slowly ending. And we can then manipulate the curve to have a quick start and an easy fade in. Let's have a look at this. Full screen. All right. So this is what we did in Premiere. Now I'm going to show you a version in After Effects. For that, let's change over. The first thing we're going to do when we started a new file is to create a new composition. This looks good. We're just going to leave this at comp1. This is full HD. This is perfect for what we want to work for. 23.976 might not be ideal to work with motion graphics, so we're going to change this to 24, and all the rest is looking a-okay. So the first thing we want to do is again create a title. For that, we will select up here our typing tool. But maybe before we do that, let's have a quick look around. This is our composition window where we will be working in. This is our projects window. We'll be working just for the sake of time without footage, but we could also drag in footage here in our project folder. This basically down here is our timeline. And here to the right, we have different options of which we will use a few. But now let's get back to our titles. So I've selected up here our typing tool or type tool, gonna hit the comp with it. And as you can see, it already created a text layer down here. Let's go with cinematic title. Nope. Title, please. All right. And what I'm going to do now to center it is select here on the right, align, open it up, and then click align horizontally. I might also stick it to the right, stick it to the left, but I want to center and then vertically also align it. I might as well stick it to the top, stick it to the bottom, but we want center. All right. And now let's play with it. For that, I'm not going to change how the title looks. This is basically the same thing we have been working in Premiere, the same options. If you want to change something in this, you can go to character and then play around with all the values here. You can change the spacing, font size, whatever you need, whatever you want, whatever you prefer. But we want to animate a little bit. So for that, we're going to open up the text layer with the little arrow down here. And we're gonna go over to this animate icon. What we're gonna do is select position. And I'm gonna change this value. So this will not, this might not make sense immediately, but at the end you'll see it'll all work out. I'll change it to 200 so that our title moves down. Gonna leave the first value at 0, the second value to 200. And then I'm going to open up my range selector. I will hit the stopwatch at offset, and I'll change this to -100. As I'm saying, it will all make sense at the end. Then I'm going to move a few keyframes forward, just intuitively. And I'm going to change the offset to 100. I'm going to open up down here one step further, the advanced window. And as you can see, we already started animating a little bit. No. But this is not really doing much. This is not really what we want. So we need to change a few values. We're going to leave units at percentage based on characters. We might leave it at that for now. Mode add is also fine. Amount 100 is also fine, but we're going to change the shape to ramp up. And what this does is give it a gradual increase, but that's a little bit too gradual. So we're going to move back here. Maybe even a bit further. Okay, so instead of going with characters, we might as well go with words. So we're gonna boom, boom, do it word for word. I will change these values here to 30% and 100%. And it's starting to look like something, right? Whoop, whoop. Okay, this is cool. Now we're gonna literally select under the animator and add to this. And we're gonna add a property. First, we're gonna add opacity. We're going to change opacity to 0. And what this does is we start at 0 and we go to 100. And this is not only looking good, but we've also created it quite quickly. What I personally like to add is a little bit of blur. But unlike in Premiere, I'm not going crazy with it. Let's do something like 15. And I think this is looking pretty nice. So this could be something, if we would export that and import that in Premiere, something we might want to work with. Let's maybe, because we still have some time left, do another version. So I'm going to select the animator, delete it, and now instead, I'm going to hit animate and go down to opacity. I'm going to open up the range selector, basically do the same thing, go to offset, -100, hit the stopwatch, for a few frames forward, hit 100 again, open up advanced, change shape to ramp up. Going to change my values to 30 and 100, is high 30, is low 100. And what this does is basically, oh, it's not doing much yet. This is because I did not change the opacity. And this is a very simple fade. But what we're going to do now is we're going to change randomize order, or rather toggle it on And what we have now is an interesting effect where our letters fade in one by one. This is when we have selected character, right? If I would change this to words, we would do something different. And there you have it. 2 ways in After Effects, 2 ways in Premiere, and you've probably seen why I personally like After Effects so much these days, just because I can move so much quicker with creating titles, and because it also gives me more options and more flexibility, which is not to say that Premiere doesn't have a lot of options. It definitely has. It was what I've been working with the first years only, but I'm saying there's literally no reason to stay away from After Effects and play around with it a little bit. So let's maybe have a look at the chat if we have any questions popping up. We have Ryan, we have Voodoo, we have Philip. Hello, you guys. How are you doing? Okay. No questions in so far. So maybe we want to play around a little bit more with our title in After Effects. By the way, if we want to have that zoom in, this is also something we can absolutely do. For that, we might close this all up again, and I will hit S on my keyboard, open up scale, and then hit the stopwatch. And to line this up with my frames, I want to select, or I want to hit U on the keyboard and see all my keyframes opening up. And I'm going to move with this little arrow to my last keyframe, and I'm going to change this value here at scale to, say, 110. But I have not centered it in the paragraph. Whoopsie. So this is actually moving a little bit off to the side. What I need to do for that is hit P, hit position, open up my keyframes again, and then go to align, bring this back to my center. And we have it slowly moving in. Let's maybe drag this a little bit out. And if I want it to be all a little bit more organic, I can go to, let's do this for position and scale because we've changed some values in our animate options. We can go to the keyframe assistant with a double click and select ease. And now we have a slowly nice looking, moving, organically moving title. And that is pretty much it for now. I much appreciate you being here, and I hope you learned some interesting ways to create titles in Premiere, but also gain some courage to try out and explore After Effects. I'm much looking forward to our next challenge tomorrow, and I'm looking forward to see you there. Stay tuned for the next stream. It's right coming up.